Okay, it says it's live, but we're gonna wait a minute. Okay, and I got a link. That's great.
There's some little participant there.
What's that?
This one, Joy's kid, maybe.
Oh.
Some interest in Bitcoin, maybe, huh?
Okay, so for those watching on YouTube, hang on for a minute, just doing some bookkeeping. We'll get this started shortly. Just tweeting out the links for anybody who's interested. There we go, tweeted out the link. Okay, I think we can get this started. I'm gonna go ahead and share the agenda, share my screen. There we go. Just a web browser this time. Okay, everybody, welcome to the Permissionless Software Foundation Technical Steering Committee meeting. This is the agenda that we've got today on our screen. Before we get started with that, actually, let's go ahead and just do a round of introductions. I'll start. My name's Chris Troutner. I founded the Permissionless Software Foundation and FullStack.cash. I've been an active Bitcoin Cash developer for the last 3 years. And yeah, I'll leave it there. I don't need to go into detail. David, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. David R. Ellen, assisting with business development for the Permissionless Software Foundation. Been around for a while.
Daniel, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, my name is Daniel Gonzalez. I've been working with Chris and the Permissionless Software Foundation for the last 2 years, and it was my first introduction to Bitcoin Cash. Well, I love it.
Right on, right on. Stoyan, you want to introduce yourself?
My name is Stoyan Zhekov, and I worked for some BSH GS bounties for the maybe last, even not a year, last couple of months. It's all.
Oh, right on, right on. And appreciate you staying up so late to make this meeting.
Yeah.
I always find you add a lot of ask some valuable questions in these things. Joey, you want to have a minute to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Joey King. I'm a developer for Bitcoin ABC. I'm currently working on a wallet web app called CashTab, and that's a browser extension and a web wallet, and it uses BCH API as its backend.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I'm hoping that our next meeting in 2 weeks, Joey can do a demo of the browser extension, because that is something that has been highly desired in this space, is an improved browser extension. But a lot of what we're going to talk about today is going to be BCH JS and some of the changes that have been made and the changes that are coming up. Let me share my screen again. So this is going to involve me doing a lot of talking because most of this is work that Daniel and I have done. And but feel free to interrupt me and ask questions, guys. I love asking questions. So, and also, I think these discussions work better if they're actual discussions and not just me on a soapbox. But to get started, there's been a few features rolled out to BCH JS in the last couple weeks. Mostly these two biggest ones at the top, sort all transactions and sort confirm transactions. They are new methods added to the Electrum X library. And what they do is, so this is the documentation for BCH JS at bchjs.fullstack.cash. You can get the API documentation. You can also get there by going to fullstack.cache/documentation. And so what these new features do is ElectrumX has an endpoint, or has had an endpoint for getting transaction history of an address. So you give it an address and you get all the transactions associated with that address. So what these do is they return, they sort them. They don't always come back sorted. And what they do is you can basically pass that output from ElectrumX into these to ensure that they're sorted by block height. And then you can add an argument, either ascending or descending. It's descending by default. And this isn't terribly interesting for confirmed transactions. The main value this adds is for unconfirmed transactions, where BCHJS will look at what the next block is going to be, what that block height is going to be, and assumes that any unconfirmed transactions are going to make it into that block. So then you get a list back of all the transactions sorted by block height. And so you just have one nice output, and everything is sorted by block height, and it includes confirmed and unconfirmed transactions. So nice little, these are little value adds for building wallets. This next one, get TX data. Okay, so when you get transaction, when you ask a full node for transaction data, it will give you back an object that has the inputs and the outputs of the transaction. And the outputs have addresses, but the inputs do not. And I don't know, what the history is of why the full nodes were designed that way. So this new function, get TX data. So that raw transactions class is the class in BCHJS that is used for getting transaction data and sending transaction data. And so I added this new get TX data method to it, and it's exactly the same thing as calling get raw transaction, but it looks back one transaction at the parents of the of each input and extracts the address for those. So when it gives you back the transaction data, both the inputs and the outputs have addresses associated with them. And this has been a common problem for a lot of wallet software. So I've heard it from multiple people, like why don't the inputs have addresses? So I thought this would be a good value add to add this method. It's probably also worth mentioning that I don't have any documentation for it yet, but there is an extension that I prototyped to this. I can show it that you guys where the code is if you're interested, but it does the same thing where after it gets the addresses for the inputs and outputs, it will then run each input and output through a hydrate UTXO call. So if it's a token transaction, you'll get the token amounts for each input and output as well. So if you're doing a token-based, anything that involves tokens, that's really helpful from a wallet application standpoint. Before I move on, does anybody have any questions about these functions, their application or use or suggested improvements? Okay, so the next one on the agenda here is what I'm planning to do coming up. And Joey, this is where I'd love to get some feedback from you. Is I'm thinking about creating, so if you look at the BCHJS documentation, it's broken up into its subcomponents, its subclasses. There's an address class, a Bitcoin Cash class, a blockchain class. And I don't think there's a transaction class, and there's no UTXO class. So I'm thinking about adding a transaction class and a UTXO class, and as well as a math class, and moving. I started a few months ago, I started this BCH util library, and it's got 4 or 5 different functions, and they're just sort of these handy macro methods that I use in all different sorts of applications, like rounding you get back like a Bitcoin Cash balance or a token balance. So I just have a handy function to round that to 2 decimal points or round it to 8 decimal points. So that would go like in the math class. And then there's like this find biggest UTXO. That's a common like need anytime you're trying to spend some Bitcoin. You need to, usually the most convenient thing to do is just find the biggest UTXO in that address and then spend that. So that's a handy function that gets a lot of usage. This chunk 20 method is like, if you give it an array of any given size, it'll return you back an array of arrays, and each element is 20 elements long. And that corresponds to some of the API calls that let up to 20 elements. So it's a really good way to like basically prepare your data before you hand it off to BCH API to like do something like give me the balance. Say you have 100 addresses, you would chunk that up into a bunch of 20 element arrays, and then you would hand each 20 element array off to the BCH API, and it would give you back the data on those 20 addresses. If you go above it, it's going to throw an error. So that's why you want to do it. So anyways, I'm thinking about basically deprecating this BCH util library and moving these handy functions into BCH.js. It just seems more appropriate that they should live there. And there's also some similar functions in minimal SLP wallet, which is sort of the wallet engine behind wallet.fullstack.cache. There's just similar things like preparing, handling. One of the UTXO handling methods I want to bring in is basically you can give it an address as input, and it's going to give you back the UTXOs. One that's all Bitcoin Cash UTXOs that are safe to spend, one that's all token UTXOs, and one and sort of an indeterminate. If a UTXO comes back and it can't be validated for whatever reason, can't be like explicitly determined if it's a token UTXO or BCH UTXO, it would just sort of get thrown into this third bucket that's like the indeterminate UTXO array. Does that sound valuable to you, Joey?
Yeah, so I mean, ideally everything should just be in BCH.js. The minimal SLP wallet, I think, as well. It's just the issue, at least from CacheTab perspective, is that we need one of the libraries to work in the browser. And right now, there's some functions that we can only get from minimal SLP wallet because of how it's built, I believe. But as for the utils, yeah, like a chunk 20 makes a lot of sense, because otherwise app developers always have to write their own.
Right. Okay, good. Thank you. It's valuable feedback. Yeah, there's certain things. So yeah, you're right. You brought up a good point there. Minimal SLP wallet is targeted for the browser. It's compiled with Browserify. It includes a copy of BCH.js in it. So anything that you want to do with BCH.js, it's there in that wallet, and it's been nicely prepared for front-end browser-based applications. So this wouldn't really change any of that. And I also look at minimal SLP wallet as sort of the next level of abstraction. Like BCH.js are these primitives, whereas minimal SLP wallet has very simple functions for doing real wallet things like what's my token balance, send a token, real high level commands. Okay, is anybody else have any comments on that before we move on? Okay, the next thing that I also have a question for you there, Joey, is the eCache and ABC prefixes. My understanding is that the Bitcoin ABC has implemented support for both of them. That's a question. And then I'm wondering if you have any insight into, I haven't even looked at this code. I need to just dig. BCH.js has this prefix support for both Bitcoin Cash, Legacy, and SLP address format. So I really just need to add these new two formats. And I haven't really looked at them, but can you confirm that these are implemented?
It's not urgent. I think since this is still kind of up in the air, the way I'm handling right now with CacheTab is I support eCache, but then before the transaction is broadcast to BCH API, it just converts it to the Bitcoin Cash prefix. And since it's unlikely anything else will change about the address format, that's always going to be possible. So once we have some more clarity on this, I think you can worry about it then. But otherwise, I don't think there's any need to try to prepare for it, since who knows, maybe it'll change. And it's also really straightforward to still have BCH API work with whatever prefix you want, with a minor tweak on the app developer side. But yeah, we'll need it eventually, but it doesn't need to go in yet.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, it's not really actually under the hood. Under the hood, I'll probably do the same thing, convert everything to either legacy or Bitcoin Cash. But it's this conversion between prefixes that I'm mostly worried about. And it's not so much about BCH.js as it is on like wallet.fullstack.cash. I'd like to be able to, depending on which blockchain you've got that application pointed to, whether it's Bitcoin Cash or Bitcoin ABC, just have it automatically sort of natively use the prefix. Because what I'm getting a lot of feedback from end users from is that they don't understand that there's two blockchains that use the Bitcoin Cash prefix. And so I'm seeing a lot of what happened the other day. Someone, I don't know, but it's been happening a lot lately where people are interested in BCHA and they don't understand that, they send Bitcoin Cash to an address, it's on a different blockchain. It's incredibly confusing. And so it's just conversion.
I mean, the current system's pretty terrible. So that's true. It's possible to configure any web-facing wallet app, though, to just display an eCash address or an ABC address right now and still use BCH API. I forget what the library I'm using that does that is called, but I think it's just the cache address library on NPM. And it'll accept a Bitcoin Cash prefix address and split it into its parts, and then you can give it any prefix you want, and it'll do the right checksum. So we're able to use that now. That could be added at some point to BCH API, but the whole point of the prefixes is that, like you're saying, there's one that means one blockchain and one that means something to prevent this ambiguity. And since BCHA hasn't really landed on one yet, trying to add anything to BCH.js doesn't really solve the ambiguity problem. So it's still a developer issue right now. There are tools that can solve it, but unfortunately, there's not really a standard. So it's kind of up to the app devs.
Right. Yeah. So that's why my plan is to support both. That way, people can use either one. I mean, at some point we'll have to pick a
but then the
default.
whole point, right, of having prefixes is that there's only one, or that it's not ambiguous, right? So if we start supporting a bunch of them, then it's like, well, why do you even have a prefix? And so some of the issues. I think ideally, like BCHA needs to just have one, and it will no longer support the Bitcoin Cash prefix. Unfortunately, that's not the world we live in right now. So it's an issue. It should be flagged. I just don't think we have enough information yet to really put this into BCH.js or BCH API.
Okay, good feedback. Good feedback. Okay, does anybody else have anything else on that topic?
It will be maybe, I think, very difficult to implement these prefixes because most of the low-level conversion libraries will stop working, like SOP to Bitcoin address and legacy to something. Most of them does not support anything else than Bitcoin.
Right.
So the changes can go very deep inside to some like low-level libraries, and it will become too difficult to change everything.
Oh, that's a good concern, Stoyan. So these prefixes are actually a pretty shallow implementation. When you really get down into the guts of it, like BCH.js and the even lower libraries that make up BCH.js, almost everything gets converted into a legacy address under the hood. So this is really just a change at the wallet level. And so that's my, I probably shouldn't have put it under the BCH.js bullet point here, because it's really something that concerns wallet.fullstack.cache more than it concerns BCH.js or BCH API.
Okay.
So yeah, it's really just a, it's that final last mile where you're presenting information to the user in a user interface. That's where this is really concerned. And then regardless of all the prefix, whether you use Simple Ledger or Bitcoin Cash or eCash or ABC prefixes, they all ultimately get converted to a legacy address when you're actually like creating a hexadecimal transaction, and interacting with the network at a low level. So the next item on the list here, message.fullstack.cache. This is just more of a PSA or a public service announcement. We use IPFS heavily on the message.fullstack.cache web application. It's used for sending end-to-end encrypted email, for lack of a better word. It lets you send it to any Bitcoin Cash address. And it does end-to-end encryption using the elliptic curve cryptography that's built into the Bitcoin protocol. But that encrypted message has to live somewhere until the recipient can get it. And that's the interplanetary file system, that's IPFS. So we had a company named Temporal who recently went out of business. And that's really unfortunate because they were providing a really valuable service. But I think with Filecoin coming out and some of the things that Protocol Labs is doing, the winds sort of shifted for them. And I don't really know the full story, but for whatever reason, they're no longer in business. And but at the same time, this company Textile, which I encourage people to check out because they're really at the cutting edge of all of this IPFS and Filecoin technology. They have a concept called buckets, which is very similar to S3 buckets. And they're a similar pinning service. It wasn't a drop-in replacement. Daniel did the lion's share of the work here, but we've got it implemented. And this is also, we've got functions in BCH.js. There is an IPFS class, and these have also been updated where you can, I don't have these very well documented, so if anybody really wants to play with these, reach out to me, but there's a web implementation, that file server web, and then there's file server, which is the Node.js implementation. The slightly different how you handle the data because Node.js has buffers and web browsers don't. But that's what lets you upload a file and pay Bitcoin Cash to have it hosted on the IPFS network. And so that's how it's implemented in message.fullstack.cache. Message.fullstack.cache also just has arbitrary file hosting. There's a section where you can go there and just upload any file, and you pay 1 penny per 10 megabytes, and it will just be hosted on IPFS for you. So big shout out to Daniel. Great job doing that implementation, and really glad that we kind of had to scramble there because Temporal did not give us much of a heads up. And so I'm glad that we didn't have very much downtime with message.fullstack.cache. Okay, so next item is wallet.fullstack.cache is now available as an Android APK. And Joey, I wanted to point this out for your sake, really. Daniel, I don't know how we discovered it. It was through this hackathon, but Daniel really dove into it. I have also copied his work so that I understand the mechanics of it. It's actually really slick. You can take any Gatsby app and just with a few steps convert it into an Android APK or an iOS binary, whatever that's called. Now getting them into the Play stores, that's a whole nother problem. But it's pretty common in the Android world to sideload APK files, particularly in the crypto space. And it's pretty slick. I got to say, this whole, and then the app, we didn't have to do anything. It just came out and worked pretty much flawlessly as a native app. So that was really surprising to me. I'm not used to things working that well. So anyways, just heads up, you should check into it. Even if it's not, a good fit for what you're doing. It's a good thing to look at.
Cool. Yeah, sounds great. I'll check it out. I haven't heard of that before, so useful.
I think that we're going to. So one of the ways that I've learned from talking with you, Joey, is that one of the ways our workflow is different than maybe other companies that would want to use our tools. Is everybody struggles with this dichotomy between web browser JavaScript and Node.js JavaScript. And mostly it comes down to buffers, this idea of binary data. They're handled differently in those two worlds. And so there's Webpack and there's Browserify. Those are the two industry leading tools for moving between these two browser Node.js worlds. Webpack does not handle buffers very well. But that is the preferred tool set for Gatsby, which is our preferred tool set. And so to solve this problem, we build the libraries on the Node.js side, and that way we can build really thorough tests. We're trying to achieve 100% test coverage in all these libraries we're building. And then we compile them for the front end with Browserify, and then add them using unpackage as an external JavaScript library on the front end. And it's sort of a circuitous route. Like I've had more than one developer look at that workflow and be like, why? I don't get it. Why are you doing it that way? But it has worked really well. And that's one of the things that I liked about Capacitor, was that it adopts to this workflow just fine. So yeah, I just thought it'd be worth pointing out for you and for posterity, for people who might watch this later.
Sure, yeah, I'll check it out.
Okay, well, that's the agenda. Does anybody have anything else they want to talk about? Well, actually, if you guys have anything interesting that you're keeping your eyes on, this would be a great time to bring it up.
What do you think about a small extension to the wallet.fullstack.cache about the NFTs? We was just talking briefly on the Twitter.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
It's not a big change. It's just how to see a better view to the tokens. So
yeah, under the hood, there's really nothing to change. It's just a visual representation.
Yeah,
and that's what I really liked about your idea. So for people who are not me and Stoyan, Stoyan and I had a little bit of a discourse on Twitter about this. Stoyan's been doing some excellent, pushing for trailblazing with the whole non-fungible token idea in Bitcoin Cash. And he's had a couple great hackathon entries on that subject. And so he's had a lot at this point. Stoyan, you have a lot more personal experience dealing with NFTs than I do. And so he was suggesting that rather than throwing NFTs into the token area, so we're talking about wallet.fullstack.cache, it's got a section for tokens. And he was suggested that instead of just throwing the NFTs in there with all the other tokens, the NFTs should really have their own area. And also one of the subtleties of NFTs on Bitcoin Cash is that there's this idea of where you create a group token like swords, and then you use that to create child NFTs like Excalibur or the Green Dragon, or like a specific sword comes out of a group. And so that architecture naturally lends itself to a lot of different things. And that's what Stoyan's been exploring. And also visually, it should probably be represented differently than a normal SLP token would be represented. Did I capture that, Stoyan?
Yes, because how to see this NFT tokens, the last hackathon was big. How to see, there was not much interest. I didn't get any, how to see, people attracted to my project. But outside of the hackathon, there's if you know this guy Joy from the SOP Foundation.
Oh yeah, I know who you're talking about.
He created waifu faucet.
Right.
It's a very otaki style, but this thing is generating like hundreds NFTs per day. So it start to to gain some moment. And for example, this Zapit wallet, their last update was specially about this Wi-Fi tokens. They created a new, like I was proposing, a new page named Collectibles.
Okay.
Because the current wallet, it's just for the tokens. It's displaying some like, it does not displaying the media attached to this NFT, which is the most attractive about NFTs. Like these Wi-Fi's, they have a connected icon on some server. So when you get one of these things, you look on some pretty animation girl connected to these NFT tokens, and you can send them to people.
So
and
that
also,
I haven't looked into this enough. The artwork that's associated with that NFT, is that just in the document URL?
That's why it's still very work in progress. In the moment, there's maybe two main types. The one that I like is just to attach IPFS hash in the token document URL. This thing started with QM, and it's pointing to the some data in the IPFS. But especially these Wi-Fi guys, girls, their icons are generated from some AI on the fly. So it's on some of this guide server. So if you go to the usual Explorer, you will not see them. If you go to simple ledger.info Explorer, you will see them. But so if you want to support this kind of tokens, it's easy. Just check if the type is waifu, and the URL is like decided. It's on this server, this one name. So it's just to have some if logic in this one. If the class is waifu, get them from there. If not, get them from IPFS. So it's not a big deal to support these tokens, including and the one that will be maybe on IPFS. Just very simple. Check for the type. But I think it will give a great visual on this specific NFT tokens. So most of the people will be attracted to use wallet.fullstack.cash because they can see their wife is there. Because there's still not many wallets that support it. In the moment, only this Zapit. And I think other guys are working on this, like signup.cash. He also was announcing in the group that soon there will be support for them in his wallet or their wallet.
So on signup.cash.
Yeah, it's like poker.
Yeah, Pooker. Yeah. This whole, like, that's the thing, is there's no standard around this. Like, my hat's off to those guys for like pushing forward. I just put a link in the permissionless software Telegram channel. There is actually a specification. It's still incredibly rough. I've had talks with Joey and James and JT about this specific problem of how do you attach like art or some sort of piece of content to a token, and then the second level problem is how do you change that content down the road. If you like, because tokens, once you make them, they're like everything on the blockchain, they're immutable. So there is actually, like, this is great. I don't think I have the bandwidth to focus on this, but I wish I did, because this is an important problem to solve, and we need to develop a standard around attaching artwork to an NFT. But then also the bigger problem is mutable data that can change over time. So I have a very, very rough specification that captures a way to do that, that I've explored with James and Joey and JT. So I'd love to see someone work on this. I don't really have the bandwidth to do it myself, but this is an important problem. Someone's going to solve it. And there's good ways to do it and bad ways to do it.
Yeah, but one very simple and quick step can be adding this collectibles to the web wallet, like Gatsby extension. So you don't need to included in the distribution of the main source, but everybody can install it on their Gatsby wallet.
Yeah, yeah. Daniel, let's talk about this at some point because it's largely a visual change what Stoyan's proposing, and I think it would add a lot of value to wallet.fullstack.cash if we implemented it.
Yeah, that could be a nice feature to add, and we can discuss how can we represent it visually from the example that you did with the sword and the child. So it could be a cool feature.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you, Stoyan, for championing that, because you're right. I mean, your intuition here is totally right.
No, it's very hot topic. That's why, like, I don't know, it's nobody still don't have it nicely done. Everybody is trying, so why we can also try? Maybe our way will be better.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can maybe we could get a bounty put together and fund it, and maybe you could do it. All right, well, we'll explore that. We'll definitely explore that. Okay. I thought there was one other thing. So one other thing that's worth mentioning to this group is Don Wanton has been funding the development of an SLP token bridge, which would let us move SLP tokens between blockchains, between the Bitcoin Cash and BCHA blockchain and the Avalanche blockchain. They have their own native token protocol. That work is progressing very quickly. We've got the Bitcoin Cash side of things completed, and we're probably in the next couple of weeks, we're going to have most of the Avalanche side of the library completed. So you'll be able to burn and mint tokens on the Bitcoin Cash side and burn and mint tokens on the Avalanche side. And then that'll be like an NPM library. And then the next step from there is we're going to retrofit or refactor the token liquidity app. So the one that's actually live in production on psfoundation.cash, that won't change. We're going to fork it and create a new app that's based on it and add this new library. And so just how if you go to psfoundation.cash, you can interact with that token liquidity app by exchanging either BCH or PSF tokens. You'll be able to do the same thing where you can create a token on the Bitcoin Cash side and a token on the Avalanche side. And then this app will be like an automated market maker and allow you to move tokens between chains. And I think that's going to be pretty cool. It'll let businesses move between chains, not completely frictionlessly, but I mean, that's just not something that's possible today. So it'll be nice to do something new.
There was also some guy announcing yesterday or today in the these Bitcoin Cash groups about the bridge between the Ethereum and Bitcoin Cash. This also will be interesting to take a look at. Is it really working?
Yeah, Anastasia and her team in the Coin Party Hackathon built an Ethereum bridge that lets you wrap SLP tokens on Ethereum the same way they do with like BTC.
I look on their code, but it was.
It's just it's oil and water. I know I had a hard time with it too.
Yeah, it was not finished. I couldn't.
Oh, really?
But if it's working, I'm not sure if it's the same group. I don't think it was. There was some single guy announcing it.
Yeah, there's a lot of people working on this idea. And that's the thing, is like, it's just not my field of expertise. So I'm excited to see people working on the whole wrapped token concept, because that's going to complement the token bridge that we're building really nicely. And Avalanche is their main focus right now is bringing is their C chain, their contract chain. So being able to take any code that runs on Ethereum and just drop it right onto Avalanche and have it work. And so I think between that technique of wrapping tokens and this token bridge that we're building, there's going to be multiple ways to move a token across blockchains, whether it's Ethereum or Avalanche or BCHA or BCH. Like I imagine like a company like Tether, who already has tokens on every blockchain, that they don't actually move them like what we're proposing. It's you could actually just have a token that you know, you could use like the Ethereum smart contract for actually like creating and managing a token, even if like the main use is on Bitcoin Cash, where the transaction fees are lower. And so it would let a business like use the blockchain that's the most appropriate for the specific use case that they need. Okay, well, I think we can wrap this up unless there's anything else. Right on. Well, I appreciate you guys making it today. We'll have another meeting in a couple of weeks. And yeah, really appreciate you guys being here and your input. Really love how this community is shaping up.
Thanks, Chris.
Cheers, everybody.